Richard Cross is the pride of Oxford and some. You can find him all over when it comes to sportscasting. It's the ESPN family of networks. It's Super Talk Mississippi, as you can tell by his backdrop, some of the logo of the show there. And he is also proudly heard on the Ole Miss Learfield IMG College Network. Richard is a guy I've always looked up to, certainly because not only did he go to Ole Miss and he works with them, but half my family went to Ole Miss. So I like to live vicariously through Richard, even though I'm over in California. And this is going to be a fun opportunity to sort of look at your career, Richard, from where you got your start to what you've been able to make it all turn into today. I'm Bryan Fenley, an anchor for Fox Sports Radio. And let's get this thing started. Richard, first of all, thank you so much for doing this. What were you like as a football player at Oxford High School?
Not very good, if we're being honest. No, it was fun. That was one of the great times of my life. So I on the team as a sophomore. I was a third string guy. And was a backup my 11th grade year, and then started my senior year. And I think we went 8-4 and got bounced in the first round of the playoffs. Okay numbers. I was probably smarter than I was fast. And that's not to say that I was incredibly smart, but it was fun. That's one of those times that you really wouldn't trade. And you were talking about career journey. It's really that kind of got me started on the path to where I am today.
So on the way up to where you are today, you had a couple stints where you were doing things in business and work that were not necessarily related completely to sportscasting. How much do you miss selling computer software to banks?
A grand total of not at all. And here's the crazy thing about that, Bryan. So that was a great company. It was a company that was started in Mississippi, grew and grew and grew. They were acquired. I've got great friends that still work for that company, friends with the founders. And, you get to a point where you realize that a fit just isn't right. And they knew that I wasn't the right fit, and I knew that I wasn't the right fit. It's interesting because I guess ultimately what I do for a living is communicate, whether it's on the radio or on television or on a podcast or whatever it is. And so there were parts of the job that I loved, the actual communication piece, when you're in a meeting, when you're trying to sell something, when you're trying to, connect with somebody that maybe you don't know at all. But it was getting to that point, the process of cold calling banks in Texas or wherever it may be. So like I said, I will never have anything negative to say about that company. Great people. It's an incredible success story that they've had. But I wasn't really part of their story along the way. And it's probably just as well for everybody.
How has your wife been part of your story in a moment, Richard, where you relied on her support in the early times? Where you were wavering, what do I do? Can I make this career happen in sportscasting? Do I go in a different direction? Where you really got a big boost from her and some of her encouragement that stands out.
Well, first of all, we've known each other for a while, but you clearly have done your homework, and I don't think that that question was just out of nowhere. So my wife and I met when she was a freshman in college. I am 2 years older than she is. She just celebrated a birthday. And she went to pharmacy school and was a pharmacist. And, because of kind of where she was career-wise, we were at a place where, we could kind of afford for me to take a little bit of a leap of faith. Now, it was a calculated risk, and there was a lot of homework that went into it. But when I left that sales job to try and start a semi-syndicated sports talk radio show. And I say semi-syndicated, it was, a network of stations in Mississippi. There were a couple of companies where I had relationships where I thought, okay, we're going to be able to kind of have enough backing to get this going. But without her saying, you know what, let's do it. Let's try. Let's go for it.
Wow.
There was no way that I could have taken that jump. Unless I was at a completely different stage in my life, because I think Jane was pregnant with our first child at that time. So we had a lot going on, and but she saw, I think, in me the desire to go out and do what I was passionate about. every single day. And it was a pretty remarkable transition for me. At no point in my life have I ever dreaded Mondays, except for that window where it was like, okay, I'm gonna go sit in a office and pick up a phone and stare at a computer screen all day, and that just really wasn't for me. And so that got me to the point where I felt really good because I knew I had her support going forward. And the kind of cool thing about our story for Jane and me is because she enabled me to take that chance so many years ago, I was able to get to a place career-wise where she was able to leave practicing as a pharmacist behind and kind of take a flyer herself.
Yeah.
And she now owns a women's boutique that's on the square in Oxford and has done really well with it. So, you think about a marriage, a relationship, it's a partnership, it's a friendship, and it's about enabling as best you're able to each other's dreams. So that's been really cool for me.
A total team effort right there. It's fun to
Yeah, no
see
doubt.
how the roles have changed and certainly benefiting both of you. And to understand Richard Cross is the fact that in recent years, he not only did he take a chance on himself, did his wife believe in him, he ends up being named sportscaster the best in the state in recent years. So those are awards that don't come easily. And so it obviously is a testament to what he's done and how much work he's put in. We're talking to Richard Cross. You can find him on Super Talk Mississippi, the ESPN family of networks, and of course, Ole Miss Learfield IMG College, on Twitter at Richard Cross STM. I'm on Twitter at Bryan Fenley, and anchor at Fox Sports Radio. What does AJ Brown think about your interviewing skills?
AJ Brown. I mean, obviously, I know who AJ Brown is.
Have you had a chance over the years to interview him?
Yeah, but it was always in kind of post game situations. So I'm the sideline reporter for the Ole Miss radio network for football, and so I've kind of got this unique opportunity, at almost the most raw stage. Within 10-15 minutes of a game ending, get to talk to players that performed at a high level in a game. Usually an offensive guy and a defensive guy. Sometimes it's a couple of guys on the offensive side of the ball, and so pretty regularly you're talking to the star of the team, whether it's a quarterback or a running back or a wide receiver. I mean, you don't spend a ton of time talking to the left guard, not because
Yeah.
the left guard's not great, but because, he's not the guy that scored 2 or 3 touchdowns in a game or had 150 yards receiving. So yeah, I had some times to talk with AJ. I don't know how he would evaluate me. I found him always to be really insightful though. He was a great guy. He was thoughtful. He was confident. And I think with good reason. I mean, I think we've seen those things manifest themselves in the National Football League. But yeah, good dude. And there've been some really cool guys to get to visit with, after games over the last couple of years.
Speaking of those guys that you've had the opportunity to interview at Ole Miss, was there ever an interview, Richard, that stands out, or a conversation you had with a football player, or even a basketball player, or any student athlete at Ole Miss, where you learned something about their story, something that they've overcome? Maybe it was off the field, off the court, that sort of moved you to tears. Like it was like, wow, they've made it this far despite going through X or Y or Z, where you knew that this is really an inspirational figure, and you are blessed to obviously be able to cover them.
Yeah, it's a good question. Um, there's a player that's still on Ole Miss's team now, Sam Williams,
Oh
and
yeah.
a guy that I worked with for a while. Did a story on him for Super Talk Mississippi, and I learned more about the journey. Now, in fairness, just kind of laying it all out there, Sam had some off the field issues that turned out not to be issues, but the university was very forthright in going through those and making sure before he was able to get on the field this year. But Sam is a guy who grew up in Montgomery, Alabama, and had a really difficult path growing up, and had some people that were taken in, and then had family members or pseudo family members who were victims of gunshot deaths. And to see a guy like that kind of make his way from a really bad home life, a really bad neighborhood, a really bad situation through junior college to the Southeastern Conference, and then perform at a pretty high level once they get there. It's pretty inspiring, because you have everything's so star driven, right? With 5-star, 4-star, 3-star, whatever, and you kind of lose sight of the fact that sometimes these players are more than just stars or stat sheets. I mean, they've got legit backgrounds, and in a lot of cases have had to overcome some pretty significant hurdles that Bryan, you or I might not be able to relate to,
Sure.
For any number of reasons. But I'm reminded that everybody's not cookie cutter. I mean, like, everybody's got something, and you may have something that's hard for you to deal with, that has caused difficulties for you along the way. I certainly have those things in my life, and so do most student athletes that come along. And so it's kind of the humanizing side of this business.
Yeah, no question. And let's go like 2014 in that football season. Where were you? What was your vantage point right after Senquez Goldson had that interception?
Cover of Sports Illustrated. That was my vantage
Yes.
point. I'm like, if you look really closely in the background, it's like, hey, there I am.
Really? Wow, that's really cool. Okay, awesome. I love it.
I was actually on the opposite end of the field, and the reason was, at that point, is that true? Yeah, I think I was on the opposite end of the field. So that happened in the north end zone, and I was on the south end of the west sideline. So that's the home sideline. And the reason is, after the game, I go to the locker room where we do the post-game interview, the coach and players or whatnot. And so I'm generally, at that point of the game, opposite end or down close to the tunnel where, and obviously this is a day where, if you're thinking ahead, if this works out for Ole Miss, things are about to get really chaotic here in a hurry. So I didn't want to have to try and lug equipment and backpack and everything through, a bunch of people that are on the field. Turned out there were a bunch of people on the field. But man, that you want to talk about a moment in time where 64,000 people in one place, and it didn't matter if you were an Ole Miss fan or an Alabama fan, were all hanging, just sitting there like suspended in time, waiting for the official review.
Yes.
Are they going to give it an interception? Are they going to overturn the call on the field and give him an interception? Are they going to say he was out of bounds? And Alabama, who's been kind of marching down the field, are they going to have another shot to keep going? Is Blake Sims going to get to try and uncork one more toward the end zone and let one of these talented Alabama receivers have a chance to win this game? Because you remember, not too long before that, Ole Miss had missed an extra point.
That's right.
And had opened the door for Alabama to score a touchdown, kick an extra point, and win, and throw the world's biggest bucket of cold water on what was an unbelievable day. Because that was the day. I mean, I'm sure you got people that may have some recollection of that day, but that was the day that Ole Miss hosted College Game Day for the first time ever. And you go, which College Game Day was that? Well, one, it was in the Grove, and it was a great scene. And two, it was Katy Perry on set throwing corn dogs around, and it was a CBS game, so there was 2:30 kickoff, and it was just one of those postcard days where the sky is extra blue and you got some puffy white clouds, and the stadium for the entire game is just unbelievably on fire. And oh, by the way, Ole Miss never beats Alabama, but was a program that was on the ascent and was trying to knock off Goliath. And so all of those things rolled into one, came down to that one moment that you're talking about, where Senquez Golson is able to catch it, toe tap inside the back line of the end zone, and then a party like Oxford maybe never had and never will again see commenced and lasted well into the morning.
Speaking of that party, where were you when hundreds of thousands of people were on the field? I was down on the field too, being swamped and swarmed, and it was an amazing feeling of elation. But you got people that are jumping on the uprights, pulling them down. And what do they do? Do they carry them through the square, the whole upright?
Exactly what they did. I mean, they carried one of the uprights out of the stadium to the Grove, marched it down I don't know if it was down University Avenue or cut across on Van Buren, and it made its way to the Library Sports Bar and to Funky's on the Square. And what I mean, who knows where that is now? I mean, I'm sure it was cut up into mementos and keepsakes, but yeah, I mean, it was quite a scene that included Katy Perry crowd surfing in a bar on the Square.
Gosh.
I didn't see that in person. I've only seen pictures and videos after the fact.
Everything was lining up for Ole Miss on that day. And what have you seen as far as an ascent here, a resurgence for the program with Lane Kiffin? When you met him for the first time, Richard, what do you remember him saying to you?
The first time we interviewed him on the radio one time, and I don't like I prepare for interviews. I know who I'm talking about. I talking to and know some background, but I generally like to try and let an interview flow and see where it goes. Yeah. And there were just no openings to do that. I mean, it was so Lane Kiffin is a really unique guy. So the next time, so that was sometime in the middle of the summer. The next time I interview him or see him or talk to him is the first game of this football season, where we're supposed to do a pregame interview, and it's on the field. And it's, an hour or so before kickoff. So he comes out of the tunnel. Kyle Campbell, who's the media relations guy, is kind of bringing him along. He stops off to talk to Marty Smith, who's the sideline reporter for ESPN that day. And they do one of these hits where they record it and they're sending it back for Sports Center or sending it to College Game Day or wherever it's going, whatever they're going to use it for. And then he just stands there and talks to Marty. So we're dealing with a format for our pregame show where it's like, okay, we've got, 12 segments we've got to get in, and we've got 12 2.5-minute commercial breaks, and everything's kind of scripted out. And he's just like standing down there hanging out, doing his thing. And that's on top of it being half an hour behind where he was originally scheduled. And so I'm like, this guy, come on, you got to be kidding me. And then he comes and does the interview, and he's engaging for the first couple of questions. And then after that, he's done. I mean, it's clear that like he has no interest in talking anymore. I ask a question, I'll get a very stock answer. And, and so like, all right, good to see you, coach. And after the game was not a lot different. So that's my first experience. And I walk away from that going, Bryan, and this guy, I mean, I know he's a good football coach. I'm just going to do my job. I know he's got to do his job. I'm not going to have my feelings hurt by it. My mom was like, he was kind of a jerk to you, wasn't he? She was listening on the radio. I was like, I don't know, Mom. I mean, he's got other stuff to worry about. She's like, I didn't like him talking to my son that way. I was like, well, at least I've got one fan. Thanks, Mom. The next week, I'm not a complete stranger anymore. And he loosens up a little bit.
That's it.
And the week after that, a little more after that, to the point that we're standing in Tampa, pregame Outback Bowl. They've got us cordoned off. So NFL stadium rules, and it's so stupid. It was one place to another. So I'm stuck in the front row of doing the way the NFL sideline reporters had to do. Not the way we've done it all year long. And I mean, whatever. They had their rules they had to follow. So basically, I have somebody grab me and say, he just wants you to come down here. I'm like, great. I mean, get me kicked out of the stadium before the season. I walk down. We just lean across the end zone, and it's like we're having the most laid-back conversation leading up to this game against Indiana. He's talking about his dad. He's like, he was supposed to already be in the Ring of Honor, but because of COVID, that got screwed up. And, we're going to play this game. I don't know how it's going to go. We got some guys that are out. We've had the opt-outs. I'm just going to let them hang. And it's the most normal, chilled out, relaxed conversation. I'm like, who is this guy? And I think what I came to learn there is, when you think about the path that Lane Kiffin has taken, being such a young NFL head coach and dealing with California NFL media and nobody being your friend there. Yeah. And then he has the short stint in Knoxville and leaves after a year, and there's a bad taste. And then he has the issue in at Southern Cal where, I mean, I can't help but think Southern Cal would like to revisit that decision about 1,000 times over since going the impatient route and moving over. And then he goes and he works with Nick Saban. And then he goes and works at FAU. And you realize this is a guy that probably has gotten burned by media along the way. Yeah. And he doesn't know me. He's just doing what somebody told him he's got to do. And as we kind of got to know each other, and I wouldn't begin to say Lane Kiffin and I are friends or are close or whatever. I mean, I think if we bumped into each other in a restaurant, he would recognize me and we would speak cordially and, hey, good to see you, and kind of go on from there. But as that relationship developed, he changed. And
Wow.
in some ways, Bryan, it was looking back on that evolution. So what? I mean, it was what, 10 games this year. So I probably interviewed him 20 times during football season, see him a little bit more than that. I guess halftime interview, 30 or so, whatever the number is. You kind of respect somebody that you know what you're getting. I mean, he's straightforward. He's a ball coach and just a guy. And he's a heck of a ball coach. I mean, it's an interesting thing. But he's Lane Kiffin one-on-one is different than Twitter Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin one-on-one is different than if he does an interview with one of your national guys on Fox Sports Radio, because it's a different audience. It's not a local audience. It's a national audience, and he's selling a brand. He's promoting his program. And I think everything he does is calculated. He knows what he's doing. He's a really smart guy. And he has figured out, I think, maybe as well, if not better than any college football coach in America, how to use social media to his advantage.
That's so well said, Richard. And to see sort of the onion layers peel back with your relationship, it's profound. And I love the insight. And certainly we're so grateful to have him, and just inspiring a new energy within the program and the way they won the bowl game. And so there's a lot of optimism moving forward. As far as your relationship and in getting to know Wright Thompson, what wows you about his brilliance?
I've said, and I'm not trying to be hyperbolic when I say this,
Yeah.
I think he is the greatest storyteller of our generation. Wright lives a couple of blocks over from me. I was out walking the dog a couple of nights ago, and he and his wife were sitting out on the front porch and just stopped and chat and visit in the front yard. With Wright, there is a depth and a breadth to the process that he goes through. Wright's not, I mean, I've spoken to classes before, Bryan, what are the things you try to pull off? What do you do? And I've always tried to kind of ascribe to the idea of work hard when nobody's looking, so that when everybody's looking, it looks like it's easy.
That's a great point.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just kind of the way I've tried to approach it. And I think Wright has got a lot of that in him. If you follow Wright on Instagram, which he does because he's promoting a book, not because he wants to be on social media, or if you're around him, you see this guy that's wearing a fedora and he's got kind of a scraggly beard and probably could use a haircut, and he's got a sport coat over a t-shirt, and it looks like it came from a thrift store. And I'd say that with him sitting right here next to me.
Yeah.
He makes it look effortless. And it's like, oh, this guy, he just sits down at the computer and starts typing, and these beautiful stories come out where he's, humanizing and digging and finding things that nobody else found. Well, that's not the case. I sat down in a coffee shop with him one day in Oxford, and we were just kind of talking about process. And because primarily what he does is long form stuff. And so the hundreds of pages that he will write and go through an editing process, and the number of trips, the number of times that he might get on a plane to Chile to go kind of immerse himself in the local culture so that he can write a story about the soccer team that got trapped in the mine, but write it in a different way than anybody else writes about that story, so that he picks one character or two or three characters, and I'm using that term loosely, out of that event, out of that saga. And he ends up taking you to a place that you never thought you would be able to go. So that's part of it with him. But the other thing to me is that Wright is talented in that he can take a football story. He can take Michael Jordan as a subject and find something that nobody else has found. He can do that with Tiger Woods, but he can also do that with a soccer player on a second-rate team in Italy. He can do it with a boxer in the Dominican Republic. He can go to Cuba and find a story about a baseball player that, came up playing in bare feet. And you think that's the story, but it turns out that that's not the story at all. The story is actually his uncle who was, part of the Negro Leagues. I'm obviously painting with a big broad brush.
Sure.
But to me, that's the genius. I think that was your question. That's the genius of Wright, is that he is able to, through his work that nobody else sees, dig through and find stuff that nobody else either could find or was able to find or was willing to work hard enough to find, self included.
Let me turn that question on you now. In what ways have you done work where nobody has seen it, where you knew that if you were able to really hammer down some things that you would be in a position you are today? Like what do people not see from you as far as your work ethic, your drive, and how those two intertwined have allowed you to begin at humble beginnings at Oxford and then have a national platform now?
We're kind of being generous with national platform.
I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt because I think you are.
Well, I appreciate that. I think like most people who work in broadcasting, whether you're talking about radio or television or podcasting or, some sort of an online platform, whatever it is, I think most people are not content with where they are. And I certainly fall into that category. I've been incredibly blessed and have had people remind me that, hey, you're in a position that there are a lot of people would like to be in. But I'm not where I want to be because I think there's more, and I think I'm capable of more. I hope I'm good enough to, at some point earn my way, more and better basketball games, more and better baseball games. Get to a spot where eventually I'm doing college football every Saturday, not just one game every 2 or 3 years. I think it's in the preparation. I think there are a lot of people that probably would be surprised how much goes into getting ready for a television broadcast that lasts 2 hours. If you're talking about a basketball game, or 3.5 hours if you're talking about baseball or football. That literally there's a 8x, a 10x, a 12x, a 20x in terms of hours of preparation leading up to those events. So for a basketball game that I do that is for 2 teams that I haven't seen before, maybe a game early in the season. If it's a situation where I've only got one game that week, then, it's easily 10 to 15 hours before I get on a plane to go to Athens, Georgia, or Baton Rouge, or College Station, or Lynchburg, Virginia, wherever it is. And it's building. This isn't like rocket science. It's just doing the work necessary so that when the lights come on the camera, you're ready for whatever pops up. And the last basketball game I did, I worked with someone who was working as an analyst for the very first time. And she said, "Oh, I hope our game's a blowout, so we've got plenty of time to talk." And that was this unbelievable concept to me. I was like, no, that's not what we want. We want all of this preparation that we've done to be completely thrown out the window because the story of the game is so captivating that that's all that matters. And then you weave some of the stuff that you've done to prepare. And I think it's Mike Tirico that probably is credited with saying, look, in a good game, 90% of what you've prepared never gets used. And think about studying for a test like that. How frustrated in college you would have been if 90% of what you studied wasn't even on the test. The 10% was, but the other stuff's like, oh, why did I learn that? I was just, trying to make a B or whatever the grade you were striving for was. Maybe that says something about who I am, if striving for a B.
No.
But to me, that's also the most fun part of this. It's, can I find something that somebody else hasn't found? Well, you're deep into it. Okay, so let's use basketball as an example. And let's say that I'm doing an Arkansas game, and it's in Fayetteville, and this is the last weekend of February. So Arkansas at that point has probably been on television 22 to 25 times, right? So all the stories seemingly have been told. So can you find something
Yes.
about Eric Musselman that hasn't been told before? Something from his background that's relevant to what he's doing right now. And that feels like a little baby win if you can do that. And nobody knows that. You're not getting credit, Bryan, for, oh, wow, you figured out, this tie from when he was in high school to this assistant coach that they're playing today. Nobody cares about that. But you do individually because you put the effort in to find something that was unique. And it's about telling stories. I mean, I think that's ultimate. I said communicating earlier. Whether you're on the radio or you're on television, ultimately it's about telling stories and trying to connect with the audience and trying to help the audience connect with the teams that they're seeing.
We're talking with Richard Cross. I'm Bryan Fenley. My final question for you, Richard, and as you sort of laid out your strategy for how you will cover games and cover teams that have mainstream storylines and they've been recycled, and you're looking for new angles to pieces and how you can present stories in obviously a unique format. What's something about you that is untold, a story within yourself that describes how much this business, this industry means to you, and what you've put in, what you've sacrificed to make this work, that isn't common knowledge, that isn't out there in an article that's been written about you, that just really gets to the heart of how badly you want to succeed?
It's a really good question. I think, and I don't know that I'm necessarily answering your question with this, but I think to a certain degree, regardless of where you are in terms of chasing your dream, there are going to be times where feelings of inadequacy creep in.
Absolutely.
You can feel like you're doing a good job, but you didn't take the next step this year, or you feel like somebody who you are either as good as or better than, gets a promotion or gets a game or gets a package that you feel like it was your turn for. And the reality is, the broadcasting business, that there's not always a clear answer as to why, and this is my experience.
Yeah.
Can't speak for everybody, but there's not always a clear answer as to why somebody gets a job, gets a promotion, gets a game, gets a package. Maybe it's because of relationships, maybe it's because of talent, maybe it's because of there was a spreadsheet that was a hole and the person scheduling most recently talked to that person, and so they were a little more top of mind. Maybe it's because they've got a better agent. Maybe it's a million different things, but you don't know what that thing is.
That's true.
And so you're left going, well, am I good enough? I think I'm good enough. I got this feedback from this person, which made me feel really good. Or I got this feedback that said, you really need to work on this. And so you're left wondering, is there something that I could have done differently? Is there some relationship that I could have fostered better along the way? Is there some networking tool that I should have used that I didn't? And then hopefully you kind of come back to reality and say, look, you're doing the best job you can. And if it works out and one day you're sitting in the chair that Jim Nantz or Joe Buck is sitting in, great. And if you don't really get past the chair that you're sitting in right now, well, that's okay too. And I have to remind myself of that. That's not the outcome that I want. I don't want to stay right where I am. But I hope as I get older, which seems to happen on a daily basis, the father time not slowing down at all. Um, I hope that my identity is not tied ultimately to, you know, did I get to a point where I was in an SEC football stadium every Saturday afternoon for 15 straight years? I hope it's more like, was I the dad that Ava Montgomery and Obie and Francis needed? Was I the husband that Jane needed along the way? Did I help people along the way? Did I seek out ways to help people along the way? And I'm not trying to be fluffy when I say that. I know that may come across that way, but hopefully that's ultimately how I'm measured. Now, if I could get to the point where I see it that way, I think that'd be a healthy spot for me. So again, I know that may sound a little sappy, but I mean, um, that's probably what I struggle with the most is not to the point where it's it's like it's just kind of a nagging thing. It's not
Yeah.
like this all-consuming thing where I can't get out of bed in the morning and I'm just dealing with depression or whatever. I mean those things, and thank goodness they are becoming so much more mainstream and people are able to talk about them. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm just talking about this like nagging feeling of are you good enough? Are you doing enough? I don't even remember what the question you asked to start down this road was. I think I addressed it, but I'm not 100% sure.
Your transparency is beautiful, Richard. You definitely did and more, and it was fascinating to get a look into your heart because I think that that's a common uncertainty with people like that are in this business, especially when you have as much talent as you have. And I have no doubt that you will get to places that you want to get to. You have it. So what am I to say that? I'm sure you get positive feedback from other people as well, but just know that stuff you're too good not you're too good of a person and obviously as a broadcaster. So it's going to all work out. But I love the fact that you look back at your family. And it's hard because in sportscasting it seems to be all consuming. You get on the road for a long time, you don't have as many, memorable encounters with family members because you're away from them or you're doing a game, and there can be this level of regret that I'm not spending enough time with my kids or my wife. But the fact that you've hammered that down and seen the effect and the impact of being with your family, I think that makes a huge
And Bryan, the crazy thing. I mean, this is obviously not a 10-month or 12-month window that any of us probably are super excited about reliving, right?
yeah.
I mean, we don't really want to go back and do March
No,
2020 through
no.
whatever today is all over again. But for me, the good thing has been I've gotten to be a dad more.
Yeah.
Like I probably in a normal year work out of 52 weeks, probably work 40, 44 weekends a year.
Hmm.
And so we've kind of figured out how to make that work as a family and try to maximize the time that we do have. But I mean, between March and the start of football season, so mid-September, I was home every single weekend. And it was unnerving. I mean, it's like, this is not how it's supposed to be. And it's funny because we reached a point somewhere along the way where Jane said, I sure do like having you around on the weekends, but I promise I'm not ever going to complain when you have to leave for work again. Like, yeah, we need to work, right? I mean, we all of us do, one way or the other. So maybe that's good on multiple fronts.
Finding that healthy balance,
Yeah,
right? That's
but that's been
Richard.
the silver lining for me and for us this year.
No question about it. And as soon as the games happen more and we get some more fans back in, your wife is going to miss you again. I can see that happening more and more. So, Richard, this has been so much fun. Richard Cross with us, obviously, Super Talk Mississippi, ESPN, and I live vicariously through him with his Ole Miss coverage with Learfield, IMG College. Certainly appreciate him for running through his career and being so open about it. I'm Bryan Fenley, an anchor at Fox Sports Radio. Richard, thanks again, man, for doing this. I think this will give people an introspection into you, what drives you, the hurdles, some of which you've had to overcome, the relationships you've built, and why, as I started out in saying, why you are the pride of Oxford and some.
It's fun. It's a cool place to live, Bryan. I know we're separated by a couple of thousand miles, but it's fun to keep up with you via Twitter and Facebook and all the other social media channels. Happy for your success, continued growth, and great visiting with you, my man.